Hello and welcome back to Live from Nowhere. Yes, we are finally back after our long hiatus to bring you more Marvel content and movie reviews and basically whatever we feel like. Um, I'm your host, Brandon,
And I'm Joe.
and today we are going to be looking at a unique retrospective on a pretty controversial Marvel series called What If. It had brilliant potential, but is in fact ending after season 3. So that is what we will be discussing today. Joe, where do you want to kick this off?
I think we should start talking about kind of our expectations for What If when it
Okay.
was first announced, because personally I had a lot of high hopes for it.
Yep.
I think What If, when it was announced, it was like, okay, this is the realm of what Marvel can be doing with their TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was announced as an anthology series, which was, I think, a great move because you have the potential to do how many countless stories, however many different ways you want, and really capitalize on all the questions that people like us, post online, whether it's on like Twitter or Instagram or whatever, or if they're making full-blown videos diving like deep into the theories.
Yeah.
Everyone is posting, I wonder if this little change happened, what would happen? And Marvel had the opportunity to answer that in a show that they were producing.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of like every Marvel fan's dream because we're always watching movies and saying, oh, that's so cool, but I always wonder what would happen if the other, option had happened. And we'll get into it, like the ultimate question of what if the other half was snapped.
Yes.
So I mean, we'll get into that. My thoughts and kind of what I had expected. I was super excited when I heard about this show. It was almost exactly like I thought it would be, where each episode is basically like a one-off, with no real implications on our greater MCU, but it explored like the multiverse and everything like that. What I didn't expect was the overarching story that had occurred with the Watcher, and because it basically seemed like every season would be a setup of like, okay, we're gonna do these episodes that have like no real relation, and then at the end we're gonna start to tie it all back together in this story. So that I didn't expect, and I wouldn't say I hated it, but I didn't feel like it was needed. They could have just kept doing the one-offs, and that would have been great.
Yeah, I think kind of talking about it all coming back together, that's one of the things that really, I think, held it back for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it was bad, like you were saying, I just think they should have went a different direction, at least in my expectations. I was hoping for a different direction, but not to get too far ahead. What If ran for 3 seasons?
Mm-hmm.
What's some of the good that came out of it?
So, I mean, I thought they kept the animation pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
They changed it based off certain episode needs, but I thought the animation was very well done. They got a lot of the original voice actors back, which was great to see.
And pretty surprising, I would say. I wasn't really expecting them to kind of latch on to this animated show, but I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, and for those that didn't come back, I think they found pretty good comparable replacements.
Yeah.
So for some of the good, I had a couple of favorite episodes that I want to talk about. One of them was so successful, or maybe Marvel always had it in the back pocket, and this allowed them to do so, and that was Marvel Zombies.
Yeah.
So I that's probably my favorite episode of the entire series. I thought it was great. I thought it was cool to see all the characters and how they would react. What did you think about that episode?
I'm excited to see it kind of be more developed through its own show. Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think that's one of the major successes is like, I think Marvel Zombies, beyond just being like Marvel Zombies and it's cool, it's zombies, how do our superheroes react to that?
Yeah.
It really got to the core of what I think a lot of Marvel fans really wanted to get out of a show like What If. And that is just not so much a weird scenario, but kind of an out there scenario.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jumping ahead into the bad a little bit, but like,
yeah.
there's a major difference between what if the Marvel Universe had a zombie infestation and what if Howard the Duck and Darcy had a baby.
Yes.
Like, there's an aspect of intrigue and kind of being pulled in that isn't in there with, the baby storyline that there is with the zombies.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that they kind of allowed it to dive into its own show that's seemingly going to be a little bit more mature as well.
Yes.
Because, one, zombies kind of needs that mature title, but also there's so many other questions that arise from something like that, which I think is good for What If, because they have the opportunity to explore it in their own show, like they are doing now with Marvel Zombies. Or it's like, we got this small snippet of it, and it's like there's so many other possibilities, and it kind of puts that in your head of what it says in kind of the title card sequence of like infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
And so you get to ponder all these other questions while getting a little bit of an answer of like, what if this small thing was changed?
Yeah. I love zombie movies and I love Marvel, so naturally it was going to be an easy win for me. But I just think they did so many things really well because they brought in so many Avengers, and it was cool to see them. You got to see people that, this is like a lot of the episodes. You got to see people that normally wouldn't interact and may never interact in our MCU. So that was cool. Seeing like zombie Wanda was awesome. I love the storyline that they set up. I just thought it was a really great episode. It's my favorite one by far. Do you have any that you want to talk about?
So I think actually it was kind of a placebo effect. Marvel has done this also with Secret Invasion.
Yeah.
Which is that I feel like the first batch of episodes, so for me in What If, season 1, the first 4 episodes are really, really good, and I was like, oh, they did amazing, they were cooking.
Yeah.
And even if, some of them weren't as good as others, it was the storylines or the type of storylines that we expect. What if Peggy Carter became Captain America? Even one that's a little more outlandish in terms of what if T'Challa became Star-Lord. Like, that's not exactly what we're looking for, but I think it was still intriguing enough to, like, kind of warrant something like that.
Yeah.
But they were proposing and doing storylines that were really interesting. I personally think that one of the stronger episodes is what if, Hank Pym went off and killed all the Avengers. Like, that one was a crazy one because it was like all these people are just dropping left and right, and it's like, what do we do?
Yeah.
But I think that batch was really strong. But that being said, I don't think any of the episodes themselves are bad per se. Like, I think everything that they chose to do, they wrote it really well, and it was a good episode. It was just more like the question of why did we come to the conclusion that we needed this one.
Yeah.
Like, I think the most, guilty example of it is going to be Howard the Duck and Darcy having a baby.
Yeah.
And with that, it's not a bad episode in terms of, like, what they did, but it's, like, why did you choose to do this in the first place?
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, you mentioned the Star-Lord T'Challa one, like what if they switched? Why did they end up switching? I totally forget.
They picked up the wrong kid.
Okay.
They just got them mixed up.
So there is a grounding to our MCU. You're familiar with that, and it's a slight twist, and then everything else just manifests from that, right? But the Howard the Duck one, that manifested from a universe that was already different from ours. So there was an episode that it was
Party Thor.
Yeah, the Party Thor one, and then it basically branched from that. So that episode, that universe was already different, and if you hadn't seen that, you would probably just be like, okay, this is just like, it has no grounding to our MCU at all. So that's what I think. Why some of them seem very like how did you come up with this idea versus like one small tweak in our MCU and see where it goes?
Yeah, and I think even like talking about Party Thor, you know, I'm personally Thor's my favorite Avenger, and I was like, okay, I don't really love Party Thor. Like, it just there's a lot of other questions surrounding Thor that I would like to see answered before I see what if Thor was a partier.
Yeah, because it's kind of he was already a little bit like that before he had his arc.
Yeah.
You know, he was already kind of like the doesn't really care jock kind of mindset for him.
Yeah, so that was a little disappointing, but I do, at the end of the day, think that all of the episodes, like I already said, are really, really good. They're really well written. The animation is great. The voice acting is great. And it's just times where I'm like, I just don't really care about the story that you're putting forth. Not that it's bad. You just did nothing to get me to invest in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of talking about the overarching part, I should probably rephrase. I actually did really love parts of the overarching story in which our different characters come together to become this like multiverse Avengers. It just felt like they did that in every season. Like it's like, okay, we're doing the team up thing again, and we're going to be like basically going full blown multiverse story. Captain Carter was there wasn't a main character outside of like maybe the Watcher, but if there was a main character, it'd be Captain Carter because she was probably in like half the episodes. It feels like.
Yes, and I think that's another kind of downfall of What If is like, for some reason there's this love and infatuation with Captain Carter. And not that Captain Carter's a bad character.
Yeah, she was great.
But it's a character that doesn't warrant that kind of attention. And I think, not even not bringing her back, but I felt like, you know, she had a really good first episode. And then her second episode was also like, we don't really need to focus on her, but we are. Yeah. Like, that could have been more of a story about Bucky and Steve. But I understand why Peggy was there, kind of switching the roles. However, I think after that, there was no real need to continually bring her back. Like, when she got pulled to another universe to help the ancient Avengers, it's like, okay, now we're just throwing her into these scenarios. And they built her up to be, like, the most important being in the cosmic universe, that she was saving all these universes and all that. And it just wasn't working for me. Like, she was never, in our MCU, built up to be that kind of character where it was like, it makes sense for Peggy or another Peggy to be so important. Like, it was just like this new character that they really just wanted to do. And then they threw in Multiverse of Madness and killed her off multiple times now after the end of What If and this. And it's like, why do we have so much Peggy Carter? I know she's apparently coming back in the new Avengers films too. Not as Captain Carter, but apparently just as Peggy Carter.
Yeah.
But it's like, where did Peggy Carter come from? It's almost like the same as another Carter, Sharon Carter. It's like, hey, let's just make her evil.
Yeah.
Let's make her, in Falcon and Winter Soldier, let's make her kind of a kingpin. And it's like, they're making these choices that make no sense sometimes.
Yeah, especially because Sharon hasn't been explained in any way. It's like, okay, you're just the bad guy now, I guess. Peggy, I really did like the storyline. But then it became a point, it's like, this show's supposed to be about exploring other characters, and she's taking up a lot of the show. This is not supposed to be a Peggy Carter hate episode, but by any means. It's just, it doesn't have to be Peggy, it could have been anybody. This show didn't need to be focused on one character this much, because you're supposed to be exploring so many different characters, I guess.
Well, even if we take Peggy Carter out, it's like, they're just choosing weird characters, because the other character that showed up a lot was Howard the Duck.
He did, yeah.
He had his own episode.
Yeah.
He was there with T'Challa's Star-Lord. He was just there a lot. Oh, he was there in the Nebula and the Nova Corps episode. He was like a main character there.
Yeah.
So there's another one that's recurring that's just really weird in Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
And it just felt like they chose these like two characters that were like not really involved in the MCU, but they were like, these are gonna be people that just show up all the time. And I don't know. It's not bad. I think they could, if Howard the Duck isn't as bad as Captain Carter, because Howard the Duck was seemingly playing someone a little different every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Howard the Duck showed up a lot, but he was always kind of a different variation of himself.
Yeah.
Versus Captain Carter was the same person from the same universe that they just kept plucking and throwing into new universes time and time again.
Yeah.
And my personal belief is that they have made a huge, huge mistake by saying season 3 is the end.
Mm-hmm.
Because What If is a show that should have ran for 10 plus seasons, had over 100, 150 episodes. Mm-hmm. Like, and even if you, say you want to take a pause, just say you're going to take a pause. There's no reason to end a show where there's supposed to be infinite possibilities and you only made, what'd they make, 27 episodes?
Something like that, yeah.
27, 26 episodes, and it's like, okay, not even all of these were 27 different, like, universes.
No, they weren't.
So, I think not having this show be over 100 episodes is like, what are we doing here, Marvel?
Yeah, I want to know what the decision was to cancel it. Was it not well received? Did you guys just want to use resources elsewhere? I can't see that it would have been a very intensive, because it's just like a cartoon basically, and they're not super long episodes, so I really do not know. It's probably the biggest mistake Marvel has made. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's a pretty big error.
I think it's just a missed opportunity. And I think it's kind of like, okay, maybe we just take a hiatus after season 3 and they say, like, this is the end of this saga of What If, and it's like, we'll bring it back when the time is right. No. But to kind of put this, like, finite what if is over on it, it just seems really disappointing. And I don't know if it's because Marvel has undergone this new, like, restructuring where there's now Marvel Animation and Marvel Television and Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. And, Bob Iger has said, like, we don't want to put as much out. So it's like,
they're pulling back a little bit.
Maybe What If was kind of on the chopping block, and it was kind of a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
But I just feel like What If, out of a lot of the shows, was one of the ones that they could have kept around for a long time. And it just kind of felt like the kind of Sunday morning cartoon of the MCU. Like, they could be putting these out and, putting them on, maybe, I don't know if Disney XD is still around, but Disney XD or something like that.
Yeah.
It's one of the ones that you could see lasting a long time, versus where, as much as I am excited for Marvel Zombies, I think Marvel Zombies has a very limited scope of its audience, just because it's not something that you can, like, put on television. It's more mature. It's a very specific audience, where I feel like What If, it felt very kid friendly.
Yeah. They could have done so much, but regardless, they are going to be done after season 3. Is there any other episodes you specifically want to talk about that you just thought, like, that was way beyond what I expected?
I actually really like the whole storyline with Ultron, because that, again, that is another thing that they explored, kind of a question that everybody was asking. It's like, what if Ultron won? It's very simple, and it's like, this is way beyond anything I expected. If Ultron won, maybe he takes over the world. No, he is, like, breaking the fabric of the multiverse.
Yes. I mean, because the stones, it's not like Thanos, like, where he was, like, using as a tool. Like, Ultron integrates the stones into himself. I can't even fathom that kind of power.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
And I think that's also one where you have good and bad to it, where I think the season 1 Ultron storyline is amazing.
Yes.
And seeing the Watcher kind of freak out was like, he means business. Yeah. And then when they fight, you don't really get to see the Watcher fight that much. He's kind of trying to adhere to his his oath.
Yeah.
But then he was like, all right, time to suit up. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's cool, but it kind of gives you a power scale of, yes, the Watcher, but also a power scale of Ultron. It's like, this is a being that is at the top of the Marvel hierarchy, and Ultron with the Infinity Stones is beating him.
Yeah.
And it's like, we avoided that.
Yeah, and the fact that I had to pull together this multiverse Avengers team, which I thought was so cool, that I thought that whole final battle, it felt very Infinity War-esque to where they were on Titan. Like, they know what's coming. They don't know if they have enough to defeat him, but that it's their best shot. It's basically because it was, who was it? It was Killmonger. They had Strange Supreme.
They had Killmonger, Strange, Gamora, which was a little weird.
Yeah, a little
because
weird. They just plucked her in.
Well, that's kind of like a behind the scenes type issue, but
they had Thor.
You had
Thor's on every team.
Yes.
Thor's just on every team.
Obviously, you had Peggy Carter. I don't know if we said her already.
Yeah.
Then you had Black Widow. And then you had
Scarlet Witch too?
Yeah, so she was already on that universe, remember? And then she's like, what are you guys doing here?
Oh, wait, no, this was the one where they were on the planet and he put Strange put all the protection spells on them?
Yeah, Black Widow was there.
Okay. I just forget then.
Yeah.
And Ultron shows up and he puts the what is the Vishanti spell on all of them, so they're all protected.
Oh yeah.
And the fight sequence was just I thought it was the coolest thing ever. How Thor threw his hammer and Strange did that one spell where it's like 100 hammers and they're all hitting Ultron. I mean, I just thought that was so cool.
And I think the other thing that episode specifically did really well is like, although I don't feel the need for in the anthology series to have some final episode that brings everything we've seen together, they did it in a way that was pretty good. Not only bringing the characters together, but you have other aspects that came in. Thinking about how Strange portaled in all the Marvel zombies.
Yes,
like stuff so like cool. That, where it was like you were having all these things.
Yeah.
From the other episodes really come together. And they did the same thing. I don't think it was done as well, but they did the same thing in the final episode of season 2, where Strange is trying to recreate his universe, and he's pulling in all these characters that we've kind of seen throughout the entire second season, and it's like they're giving weapons that we've seen. You know, you have the 10 rings come in, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so
I think Stormbreaker and some other pretty famous MCU weapons.
Yeah, so you have like similar things happening in the second season, but I think kind of the trend from season to season was like they started off really hot and since then really kind of went downhill.
I would say so. Season 3 almost felt like, okay, we just need to wrap this up. Let's just get a few stories together and then we'll do something with the Watcher. And then that was basically how they were going to do it.
Yeah.
And then no more stories to be told. So.
Yeah, and I think something that was a little unique with it being situated in the MCU versus in the comics, or I've been reading the What If Marvel books, and some of them are a little outlandish, a little bit weird, but it's a little different. They have more liberty and authority to do that, where they can kind of pump out comics with a little bit less labor. Not that it's not hard, but it's like you don't have a whole team of animators working on it, you know. And I think you get a little bit more grace of taking longer to write books or comic books. But some of the storylines they did there were really interesting and were outlandish. But it was like, for some reason, I didn't feel the same disconnect from them. And I think it's because there wasn't this like MCU that it was tied to.
Yeah.
I think the problem of trying to do the same thing the comics did with a TV series is that the comics have the liberty of not being tied to really any main universe. I mean, there is like comic universes, but it's like we don't have the MCU that we're always in the back of our head.
Yeah.
Because there were stories about what if Loki was worthy, which is one of the episodes I really wish that they did here.
Yeah.
Is like, what happens if Loki is worthy?
Yeah.
What if Wanda and Peter Parker were siblings?
That's cool.
What if Mark Spector was Venom? So you have a Moon Knight Venom, that was actually my least favorite of the 3 books. It's a little weird. That one gets into the multiverse a lot more. There's 2 Mark Spectors. There's one with Venom and one with Khonshu, and it's a whole thing. But they have stories like that are really interesting. And then in the comics, they have some interesting ones as well that kind of pull together 2 characters that aren't really connected. There is one very controversial Marvel comic of what if Miles Morales was worthy, and that's just because the author got a little racist.
Oh really?
it was pretty bad. There's some bad things in there, but you do have stories like that of what if Sue Storm was Venom? What if Black Panther was Venom? You have all these things, and you can kind of pump them out a little quicker. But I just think that they tried to do too much of like whatever they wanted, and were just throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah.
And then just kind of doing just weird things when what they should have focused on, which I've said time and time again in this episode already, is like take a question from the MCU and use that as your launching point.
Yeah. Or just think about like we see the Avengers interact so much. Have them interact with people, and then they I mean, you didn't finish season 3, right?
I no.
So that they brought Storm in.
I did see
at the very end.
Yes.
It's like those are people they should have been interacting with the whole time, and you get one Storm appearance, and then that's it. And then all the X-Men.
Yeah. I think Storm wielding Mjolnir is like something that they really could have done.
Yes.
A big focus on, and it's like it's kind of the theme like at the end where they show all these other multiversal beings that you have like Weapon X, Thanos, and stuff
for like a second.
Yeah, it's like, why didn't we get any of this stuff?
Yeah,
and it's kind of shooting themselves in the foot in a sense. It's like, let me show you all these other things that are more interesting that you could have had and that we didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of things they could have done. I wished I love the episodes where we got characters that would interact that never met before, because we might never have the opportunity on our actual MCU, but at least we can see it here, and it's like, oh, both of their personalities is exactly how I thought they would clash or meet. So, yeah, I had some episodes that like weren't my favorite as well. Just like you said, I didn't hate any. I just thought, oh, that episode wasn't what I expected at all.
Yeah. I think for me, it was really the episodes where they focused on, I hate to say it again, but like Peggy Carter when she wasn't involved.
Yeah.
Like having the old Avengers team form really, a long time ago, and it's like, we didn't need Peggy Carter there. That could have been an isolated story. And they made it like this bigger multiversal thing, but it was like, the concept of it in itself is very interesting. Yeah. And it's like we threw Peggy Carter in there for what reason? And so that's where I really kind of didn't love them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. What else did you want to discuss about What If?
I think one of the things that What If also could have done that we haven't touched on at all is there's an episode in season 2 where they create a whole new superhero. And
the
Kaori.
Yes.
So you have, maybe I'm a little biased, but you have, this whole nation of Native Americans who have like the Tesseract power kind of, and all this, and it's like a rich backstory. They introduce a new hero. That is something that I think What If also could have done. Like they could have had 2 different types of kind of storylines. The ones where it's like we answer what if something else was changed in the MCU, and then we have a question of, what if X and X happened and a whole new hero was created? And that's a good way to kind of, jumpstart a lot of storylines. And I don't think they needed to throw in 5 new heroes, but I think what they did with Kaori was good, and it was interesting. She was really powerful, kind of going toe-to-toe with Doctor Strange.
Really powerful, yeah.
All of those monsters in them. And so that, I think, was also another really strong episode.
I really liked that as well. It was a really well drawn out episode. I loved that it gave another layer of history to the Tesseract because it's been so many places, and it's cool to see where it was in this time period. So yeah, that was a really great episode as well. I loved that what if Strange lost his heart instead of his hands, and he basically dissolved his universe. I loved that episode. It had a lot of heart in it. Answered some questions in terms of like what were they, the absolute point, or
and that's kind of like the first time I think we got introduced to that. And it came up a lot of other times, and I think it'll be a pretty big part of leading up to Secret Wars and what's it called now?
Doomsday.
Doomsday.
Yeah.
I want to call it King Dynasty, but
I'm
not really talking about that one anymore.
Yeah. I don't know what they're gonna do with that. It'll be interesting to see if they integrate anything from the show into the real life MCU, because obviously some things have come from real life. Multiverse of Madness had some characters that were in here, so it'll be interesting to see how much they isolate this versus like, oh no, you got to go watch What If you want to watch this movie.
Yeah, I think it's not a direct 1-to-1, but you have Strange in Multiverse of Madness. Mm-hmm. You have Captain Carter Multiverse of Madness. There's some rumors that Kaori might kind of pop up.
That'd be cool.
I would expect that to maybe be a post Secret Wars thing. That roster's already kind of big.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a character that, although I like kind of her story and her background, that arguably a lot of people aren't going to either know or care about in the same way. So I think that could be like a post Doomsday and post Secret Wars edition.
Yeah.
But
I think that'd be cool.
Other than that, I don't know how many other things you really would bring in. I think we have the possibility of Storm wielding Mjolnir. That could come up, especially as we get more of the X-Men, but I don't think there's going to be much more direct into the MCU as...
Yeah. I don't think so either. I think it will be isolated. I think they just want to have this like nugget of a show and have it be whatever it's going to be, and then they're just going to keep working on other stuff. I think that's what they want to do with What If. I think they thought it was great. They probably think it's done its time for whatever reason, and they're ready to move on to other things.
Yeah. So, kind of as What If is wrapping up, almost a moment of memoriam in what we could have had. So, are there some episodes that you really wish that we saw?
Yeah, the obvious one, and we had a whole episode on it, which was What If the Other Half Was Snapped.
Yes.
That was a layup that they never did. I don't know why. It's been all over Marvel media since Infinity War came out, so don't know why they didn't do that. I would have absolutely loved to see that. Probably could have been like an hour-long episode.
Yeah. My guess is maybe that because it's been all over Marvel media that they didn't do it. That's my only assumption, is like everyone's theorized it.
That's a terrible reason.
And everyone's thought of, all these other things, and they're like, everyone spent so much time on it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's they don't want to spend more time on the snap, and they were trying to get into this, multiverse saga that kind of branch off from the kind of Infinity War saga, and it was like, we don't want to have our main kind of thing that embodies the multiverse be the best episode be tied to the Infinity Saga. I don't really know. That's my only thought, is like they were trying to separate themselves from the Infinity Saga while also still, I guess, not getting into anything that was too worn down or like it's been theorized to death.
Yeah.
But that felt like, to really set the tone of what If is, that should have been episode 1.
I totally agree. That it was such an easy episode to do for that, in my opinion. Just some other ones I'll touch on. I wish there was a Captain America Civil War type episode, but with different people involved for whatever reason. That would have been really cool to see because I really love that movie and those dynamics.
You have a lot that you could have done with that movie, really. Because you also could have been like, what happens if Rhodey died? And then you see like a Tony Stark really go off the rails.
Yeah.
You could do a what if the sides were switched.
Yeah.
And like they, had different morals there.
Yeah.
You have a lot of what ifs just within like Civil War. And that, again, gets to the point of like answer the MCU questions. Come up with your own, but
what if you actually did have Thor and Hulk involved? Who would they side with? And what difference would it make? I mean, it would.
You better hope they're on the same. If they're on the same side, the Civil War is a
no way. Movie. Otherwise, they got to be on different sides. Would have liked to see, because I thought something that would have always been cool. Because the two like main teams I thought we always had was like Avengers and Guardians. I would have liked to see like some kind of a battle between them. Probably would have had to juice up the Guardians a little bit, give them some more powerful people in order to fight the Avengers, in my opinion. But I thought that would have been really cool. Would have really liked to... I thought we were going to get this with what if Hulk fought the Mech Avengers, but I really would have wanted to see like almost a World War Hulk just fighting the Avengers and what the Avengers do to fight that. Didn't get that in the Mech Avengers one. And we've seen him fight the Avengers in bits and pieces. Like, we had him fight the Hulkbuster.
Yeah.
We've seen him fight Thor in the first movie. But really just, like, the ultimate form of Hulk and what the... because they were all fighting them one-on-one. Like, he's so powerful, they need all of them together to fight him. I would have loved that episode. So.
Yeah. I think... that would have been a good one. I think, really, you could go off in a whole series of what if Hulks.
Yeah.
Really.
There's so many possibilities. I mean, they're all good ideas.
Yeah. I think for me, what if Loki was worthy is kind of the lay of one for, a lot of reasons. The way they did it in the book, kind of spoiler, is like, Loki wasn't worthy. Loki sends the Destroyer to Earth as like this prank to prove that Thor isn't the golden child and he isn't like the chosen one. And there's like another like mysterious force that ends up getting in kind of the Destroyer's mechanisms, and Thor dies. And so Thor is banished to Earth as kind of being unworthy. He's stripped of everything because he is not... because they blame him for the death of Thor, Odin, and Frigga. And he goes throughout this entire storyline where he goes on this kind of journey with Valkyrie to save the war between Earth and the Asgardians, because... missed an entirely big part of it. Because Happy Hogan... also gets killed by the Destroyer. And so Tony Stark is on this hell-bent revenge thing where he is trying to use Mjolnir's power to recreate the Bifrost, and so he can take the armor of the Destroyer, and he's remaking the Destroyer into an Iron Man suit essentially. And then he's gonna go to Asgard and kill all of them because he's they're gonna know not to mess with Earth.
Yeah.
So Valkyrie and Loki are on this journey to stop Tony Stark. Jane and Thor have a kid in this, and she's wielding Mjolnir, and Tony Stark kidnaps her, and so there's this whole thing where Loki saves the only heir to the throne and all this, and it's a really interesting storyline. So I'm glad I got to read the book at least, but I do feel like it doesn't even have to be that story, but another story would have been really interesting. To see
for sure.
What if maybe it wasn't even Loki becoming worthy, but what if Loki was always worthy and Thor was kind of the cast aside child? That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I agree. I think what if the other half was snapped was a big one that I really want to see.
Yeah.
But another one that we unfortunately never got to see, and a reason I theorize that they didn't do this is because we have the X-Men coming up. But what if Quicksilver didn't die?
Yeah.
What if he survived Age of
That's
Ultron?
a really good one because it's grounded MCU, but it's right there.
Yeah, and it's not like they could have done anything because we didn't see Quicksilver for really long at all.
No.
So it could have been a lot of different things. You could have done a what if Quicksilver lived and Wanda died. You could have done a what if Quicksilver failed to save Hawkeye, and maybe you can go into guilt or something like that. If you have like a lot of possibilities, but I felt like that was another easy one. It's a really big question.
Yeah.
You could have done what if Agatha Harkness drained the Scarlet Witch's power instead of what if Agatha went to Hollywood? Like you have, I think, small changes, but there was a couple layups I felt like were in there that didn't really get taken advantage of.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's overall it's just unfortunate that it's gonna end. It was probably top 3 favorite MCU show for me. So I'm disappointed, but when it was here, it was pretty great, I would say.
Yeah. So, kind of thinking about the future of the MCU, we're kind of nearing the end of this multiverse saga.
Mm-hmm.
And so, does What If play any indication, or does it make you feel any type of way about the multiverse saga as a whole?
What do you mean?
So, I would say that I think What If is like an indication or like a microcosm of the multiverse saga as a whole in terms of it's something that had a lot of potential. There was a lot of possibilities, but for one reason or another, it just fell kind of flat and didn't live up to its potential.
Yeah, I see what you're saying now. I think it's a great representation of the saga as a whole. I think it's very easy to get excited about the multiverse saga, but then it's like, okay, are we gonna have like a singular story that like tries to tie everything together? Maybe they just got in over their heads and they didn't know how to bring everything together.
Yeah.
And I think that's one possibility because I can see how there might have been too much going on with the multiverse, and you had Kang, you were trying to bring in the X-Men, you were trying to see who's left of the Avengers, you got these young Avengers coming up, and maybe it was just all too much. And they opened Pandora's box, and I think now they want to close it because they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, I would agree, and I just think that the multiverse was something that everyone was really, really excited for. There were so many possibilities, and I think there's still redemption to be had if they get this whole Doom arc really, really perfect.
Yeah.
Like, Secret Wars is no small comic storyline. There's a lot to do in there, so I think that could be a big redemption arc for the multiverse saga if they're able to do that. But I think overall there was just it felt like there was a lot to do in the multiverse saga. It got done way too quickly, and it's wrapping up way too quickly. And I think when you look at What If, that's kind of the same thing, is a lot of possibilities, a lot to do. And I don't know necessarily that it was done too quickly, but it definitely wrapped up too soon for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing, it kind of speaks to the greater MCU, and not so much the show. I think we were starting to get to a point to where even maybe hardcore Marvel fans were struggling to keep up with because you had Shang-Chi start, and there was, Strange already started to do this, but Shang-Chi really started to do dimensions. There's dimensions, but then you have to explain to people that, okay, there's different universes, but then there's different timelines. That's really complicated, and I think they were starting to lose a lot of general audience, I would think, because it gets really tough to start to explain those aspects and complicates the story, and you start to get away from those core themes that the original MCU was doing, I think. So that's what I think is going on.
Yeah. Well, to kind of close out this What If retrospective episode, there's a lot of negativity, I feel like, in this one. But what is, as we look ahead to the 2025 Marvel projects, what is your most anticipated one?
I do have a Hulk mug sitting in front of me, so I don't want to go with Brave New World. But I might have to, just because I might finally get to see a fully rampaged Hulk again. But, I mean, so I'm really excited for that one. I'm probably most excited for Fantastic Four, because this feels like... I mean, they've already done stuff with the X-Men. This feels like one of the last things they really got to pull in from the pre-MCU that they can't mess up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they did the Spider-Man stuff. They did that really well. They've started to touch X-Men stuff. And the X-Men stuff they've done so far, I think, has been done really well. This is the last thing they got to pull in. And I think it just has a lot of stuff that has to be paid off. I love the original Fantastic Four, so... I'm really excited to see what they do with this and how they tie it in.
I agree. I think the layup is Fantastic Four.
Oh, you think so?
I think that's like the layup answer.
I thought you meant it was the layup movie.
I think
that's the easy one. That's the easy win.
I think it could be their easy one. I think it's out of, just thinking about box office, I think that's the most likely to hit $1 billion.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pressure with that. But I think most people would say Fantastic Four, and I think by the end of the year it'll be Fantastic Four for me. But I do have some trailer bias, I think.
Yeah.
And so mine right now is Thunderbolts.
Oh, okay.
Just because I didn't have high expectations for it, and then the trailer came out and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think if there was maybe the Fantastic Four trailer after it, I would probably be saying Fantastic Four right now. But since I haven't seen the Fantastic Four trailer, besides the one that was leaked from Comic-Con, I think Thunderbolts is just, there's a lot of moving parts to it. You get to see Sentry, who could be someone that's super powerful coming into the MCU, and it's just I don't really know what the full storyline is going to be there yet, and so I just kind of want to see how it goes, and if it works, we could have an MCU version of the Suicide Squad, which I think would be really, really interesting to have at play in the MCU.
That movie will probably be the most fun, because I'm excited to see those villains, interact and how they try to be a team in some way. I think that'd be really cool. Anything for Brave New World?
I mean, I'm just kind of excited to get a little bit back into the theater for the MCU.
Yeah.
I think Brave New World will be intriguing to see kind of a full-blown Cap. You had him kind of step into that mantle, and now we have him kind of full-blown. And I think my biggest thing is Tiamat. It's okay, we're finally acknowledging the Eternals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Big time. I mean, they're like, okay, we've heard what you said. We're gonna make him a big part of the story, and we're gonna put him on the movie poster. So, we guys can stop complaining.
Yeah, but I would say that's kind of my big pull. But also someone who, for some reason, isn't really being emphasized a lot is the leader, and so the leader's gonna
in it that much.
Yeah, so I'm very intrigued by what he ends up having in terms of a role in that movie, but that'll be coming up very, very soon, so we'll see.
And now that I think about it, this is our real... this is a knock on Deadpool Wolverine. This is our first real return to the MCU that we know. Because Wolverine and Deadpool was kind of there was stuff happening in all of their different universes, and it was really a Deadpool Wolverine thing. This goes back to our Earth, our MCU, and we get to see what's happening. It kind of feels like we're coming back to it.
Yeah. So, with that, our What If retrospective kind of comes to a close. Next time we'll be diving a little bit deeper into Brave New World and our predictions and our expectations for it. So you got a little bit of a preview for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're back. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.